Welcome back. So, about once a year, I do a video where I talk about, does this team get relocated? Does this team not? I didn't last year because we had all that uncertainty at this time last year. So, I didn't really need to worry about this last year. But again, it's still a topic of conversation, right? Move the Panthers, move the Coyotes. They got to go. And of course, Quebec's the popular location that people want to send a team to. I love the Nordiques. I think Quebec City could support a team, and I think they do quite well. But the NHL has to be on board for it to work, and you have to have somebody with deep pockets as well to back up that franchise. So we'll start with Florida. Miami is the seventh biggest U.S. market. The NHL does not want to lose that market. We can have the debate about whether a big market necessarily means a good sports market. I don't think those two things are tied together. I think there are small locations where you have great sports support, and then you have big locations where you just don't. There have been times where the city of Los Angeles, as huge as it is, has been accused of maybe not supporting certain franchises in certain sports as well as they could. And other sports they may. Because the other part of this conversation too is some parts of the US are going to be football, some are going to be baseball, some might be big into basketball, and some might be big into the NHL. It doesn't necessarily mean that all of the sports are going to work there. So with Miami, the NHL really wants to stay in that area. They want to stay in that area. And the one thing that I always say about the Florida Panthers is they haven't won a series since 1996. And playoff success, also regular season success, is very elusive. So it is hard to build up your fan base when you don't win. And it's not just a matter of, there's some trouble in that first round. They don't make the playoffs nearly enough. When I did the playoff history video and we talked about Florida, it was pretty sparse when you look at their playoffs at all. So they have an arena lease that lasts until 2028. But it has an out next year. Now, it says 2023, but technically, if the team's going to opt out, they would have to announce that to the arena with it a year out. So they have to give them a year's notice, and they have to prove that in the 7 years since they signed this agreement in 2015, that they've lost $100 million. And if they've lost $100 million, and if they want to leave the building, then they can absolutely put in to leave the building in 2022. When they signed this agreement, they got $86 million in funds with their current lease, and that's taxpayer money. So they got a lot of money up front and overall from, I believe it's Broward County. And so it's a pretty sweet arena deal for the Florida Panthers, right? And it's part of the reason why I've said in previous videos they're not going to move. Now, the other part of this is their owner is Vinny Viola, who is worth, December 2016, it said he was worth $1.78 billion. He's a billionaire. He's a billionaire businessman. And, you know, for a billionaire businessman, sports franchise, if it's losing money, well, then that's write-offs, right? And you can, have your books reflect that and probably pay a little less in taxes. So I don't think owners worry as much about losing money depending on how much they're losing. But if they lose $100 million over 7 years, and let's just say they do go to the county and say, yeah, we've got to get out of this lease, we're going to leave in 2023, my guess is they would try to find somewhere closer to the city of Miami, somewhere outside of Sunrise, and it would have to be an NHL level building, which is tough to find, as Arizona has had that issue with Gila River for a long time. Gila River, they've had issues with that arena and dating back many years when we thought Arizona was likely going to go, when their ownership was either not very good or the NHL themselves took over the franchise to try to save it. The Coyotes are a little more stable now than they were then. When Alex Mariuello took over, that brought in big money. It's another billionaire owner. And it gave that life vest to the Arizona Coyotes that they needed. And I will say this, and I've said this before too, if this situation soured and if Alex Mariuello said, you know what, I can't make this work. This does not work. If he said that, that's when the NHL, I think, would finally say, okay, we've been doing this for 2.5 decades. It still doesn't work. We're going to have to think it over. Now, The Coyotes have proposed a $1.7 billion development in Tempe. And that development, that's still out there, still pending approval, and they're going through all the hoops that they need to go through, all the red tape they need to go through in order to make that happen. The plan is that the Coyotes will end up in Tempe. The question mark then becomes, so let's just say Gila River sticks to their guns and boots them out at the end of this coming season in 2022. There's still going to be probably 2 years minimum where they'd be waiting for that new building in Tempe. And so they need that temporary home. Now, people always say, well, why don't the Phoenix Suns just take him in? The Phoenix Suns owner said he doesn't really want to share the building with the Coyotes. That's fine. He's within his right to say that, and if that's his belief, then that's fine. And you can see at times where basketball and hockey sharing the same building doesn't necessarily work. But for a temporary home, Arizona could go any number of routes and make it work. Phoenix, the city itself, is the 10th biggest market in the U.S. So when people ask why they're still there, I really think that's the reason why. The NHL knows that if you move a team out of South Florida, you're not going to be able to get back. You move a team out of Arizona, you're probably not going to be going back there. I'm wearing an Atlanta hat. They're not going back to Atlanta. I'm wearing a Milwaukee Admirals jersey, where I don't think the NHL ends up going either, but certainly there are a lot of questions about it during live streams. Do you think hockey can work here? What about here? The answer is sometimes the hockey will work, but the money doesn't. So you may be able to get fans into the building. It may be a lot of fun to play there, but they may not have an NHL level arena. They may not have a billionaire owner that has deep pockets, that's capable of dealing with losses and covering anything else they need to in startup. So with Alex Mariuello and Vinny Viola, these are two owners that absolutely have that kind of money. And $2 billion is the most recent assessment I've seen of Mariuello. That was from 2018. He's a billionaire. And we've had discussions on this channel before about the way things go in Arizona and issues with maybe ownership and management and yada, yada, yada. But Arizona has the same problem that Florida has. No playoff success, right? So 2012, they went on a decent playoff run. But outside of 2012, they have been largely irrelevant. So when people talk about fan attendance in Arizona and Florida, I think you have to have that asterisk. That these are teams that, yeah, their attendance has been a problem at times. But the team's direction, I think, has led to and made that situation worse. Florida has supported the team before. Arizona has supported the team before. And I think both of them are capable of making money. It just involves having the right management, the right strategy, and the right marketing. Marketing is a huge part of this too, right? So with Florida and Arizona, those are the two teams that people most likely are going to say they should move. They should move. And it doesn't happen. I didn't put Ottawa on the board because I don't think there's any chance that A, Melnyk sells. And then you'll see the rumor, blah, blah, blah. Melnyk's not going anywhere. And of course the comments he made a few years ago now about, well, if I can't make money here, but there's been nothing to indicate that he's running out of patience with Ottawa or he's even considering moving the team out of Ottawa. They need a new building as well. They absolutely do need a new building. They need one that's closer to the city itself and definitely a better setup than what they have right now. But there's almost zero chance that Ottawa moves. So it all comes down to Quebec City, right? So when Vegas was coming in, Quebec City put in their bid, and this was, $650 million bid, and that was in 2015. The Quebec bid ends up being deferred. The NHL doesn't really come back to it, but Quebecor has never really come out publicly and said they got hosed or this is unfair or they want, a big, let's have a march about it. I haven't seen anything like that because I think Quebecor understood that the financials didn't really work. So we saw the Canadian dollar kind of tank a little bit after that bid was put in, which raises the amount of money it costs because that's $650 million. That's not Canadian, that's American. So the more that the American dollar's up and the Canadian dollar's down, the more expensive everything is, right? Which is part of the reason why the NHL has issues with having teams moving to Canada. You can have a team in the States that's making 10% less. Maybe they've got 10% less attendance, but when you've got that American dollar factored in, maybe they're bringing in more money. So, right, and I know that Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, big money makers. I believe Edmonton now with the new building and the setup they have, big money makers too. But that lower Canadian dollar definitely makes things tougher, right? And not only that, but with Quebec, it is the seventh largest market in Canada, but North American wise, it's 80th. So between the U.S. and Canada, okay, not including Mexico, so between the U.S. and Canada, it is the 80th largest market. And it is a market that's already really into hockey. And part of the question that the NHL asks if they're going to do an expansion is, are we bringing in new fans? Are we possibly netting more money for ourselves? And I mean, for me, I look at it as, well, are the other teams turning a profit? Because to me, if certain teams aren't turning a profit, and if that's dragging down league revenues and also dragging down, you would think, salaries as well. Like when teams are losing money, and if that's affecting the salary cap in a negative way, that's got to bother the players on some level, right? But Quebec, I really don't think it happens. So now at this point, if there's an expansion team coming in, Seattle, it was $750 million. You've got to think it'll be at least $750 million again, which is a little over $1 billion Canadian to get a new team. So then it becomes a matter of, well, if there's a relocation, uh, Houston's first in line. Houston's absolutely first in line. And I know that's sad for Quebec City and everything, but Houston is first in line. So expansion requires three-quarters approval of the Board of Governors. And so does, I believe, relocation is three-quarters of the Board of Governors too. So anything you want to do, you have to have at least three-quarters of the NHL teams saying, yes, we think this is good for the league. Yes, we think this is the right move to make, or it doesn't happen. So it's tough because even if, let's say, Quebec wanted to come in, I don't know that three-quarters of the teams in the NHL would necessarily approve of that. And that's where Gary Bettman gets he gets that negative feedback from fans because he's the public face of that. Board of Governors say, we're not doing that, Gary. He goes, all right. And he gets to go out there and be the public face saying, we've decided no. And to basically state it as if this was my decision, because that's how this works. He is very much that smokescreen that keeps the owners from getting anywhere near the level of dislike that they used to get back in, say, the 80s. The 80s, for instance. So expansion is tough. Relocation is difficult too, because you have to have an owner with deep pockets. So if let's say Florida says no, Vinny Viola says, all right, I'm down, I'm out. You want another billionaire owner in there, and Houston may have that. Houston is the fifth largest market in the U.S. These numbers are, again, it depends on how you look at it. Sometimes it's the metro population. Sometimes it's other things they use to describe what makes it a big market. Kansas City's 31st. There would be some concern with Kansas City about whether or not the attendance would stay up. And Kansas City had an NHL team and it didn't go well. And it's only 2 years, but take it from a guy who used to cheer for the Vancouver Grizzlies. Once you have that negative impression with the league, it's really hard to get out of it. Portland at 21st or 25th in terms of size. I think Portland makes sense for an NHL team. I don't know that the NHL would want to put another one in the Pacific Northwest unless they were putting one in the East. And of course, the idea of going beyond 32 teams is crazy, right? It's been out there that the NHL would love to go beyond 32. And during this time where we've seen so much money go out the door over the last 18 months, the NHL might be a little bit more vulnerable to somebody coming in with $1 billion and saying, I was thinking, got a building here. I'd love to have an NHL team. They might be more vulnerable to that right now. So if you have $1 billion, give Gary a call. I don't. I'm like $1 billion short on that. So yeah, Portland gets raised a lot. Milwaukee as well. Milwaukee, home of the Admirals, is 40th in terms of size. I don't see the NHL looking at that either. And then of course you have your popular destination of, what about going back to Connecticut? Connecticut is very good for hockey. I really think that if you had the right building for a rediscovered Whalers, the Whalers come back to life, I think that could work. And I think you would have, first off, I think if the Whalers were to return in some form, I think you'd have tremendous sales, as you would with Quebec. Their merchandise would move like crazy, because it does now. And they haven't had teams in around 3 decades. So really, it's been a long time. And people are still buying this stuff. So Hartford and Quebec could work on a merchandise basis alone, right? San Diego's a big market. I don't know that the NHL would look at another team in California necessarily. And of course, if San Diego were to get in, Portland probably doesn't. And then there's the Hamilton situation, where Hamilton has a couple of times thought they were getting an NHL team and then had the rug pulled out from underneath them. I don't think Hamilton gets into the conversation. I think Hamilton most likely ends up, much like I think with Regina, I think you end up in a situation where you probably get the odd outdoor game. You might get an exhibition game. You might get a regular season game at some point, but I don't think the NHL seriously considers a move there. But it is that discussion point that I understand that there's people who want to see teams move. I don't think it's going to happen. And again, if Florida decides to opt out next year and they send that notice, we're opting out, Vinny Viola would have to have a backup plan, and that would mean another arena, which I would think would still be in Southern Florida. And again, it's a pretty sweet lease deal that they've got. The team itself is losing money, but not on the lease with that building. And if this team does well this year and they do well in the playoffs and they start selling out that building, which I think they absolutely can do. We saw in the playoffs last year that with a good team and a lot of hype, Florida can sell some tickets. So, and Arizona, sadly, this year, it looks like that team's basically gutted. And if their attendance is down, you'll still hear people saying, well, I can't believe the attendance in Arizona. That's just terrible. When the team is very likely to be pretty bad on the ice. But that's how all this works. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.